Hello and welcome to the program. For years, Ukraine's LGBT community had little to no interactions with the country's social scene. During Soviet times, homosexual relationships could be punishable under the criminal code, but everything changed following Ukraine's independence in 1991. Nowadays, Ukraine's LGBT community activists can lead a happy life, revealing their sexuality to the world. But is that really so? Joining us in the studio today is Zoryan Kis, activist of the international human rights organization Freedom House. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for the invitation.
So my first question would be when did the Ukrainian LGBT community start expressing themselves openly? Was it right after Ukraine gained independence or maybe later?
Well, it was a lot later. First, LGBT organizations emerged in Ukraine in 1995 and 1996, but really the movement started flourishing in early 2000s. In 2007, we organized first national LGBTI conference here in Kyiv, and then only many years after the conference in 2013, we were able to hold the first successful Kyiv Pride March.
In 2007, you said you had the first conference. How did the public react to that event? Did you get any feedback?
Well, this is a very good question, because back in 2007, the conference was almost secret. Half of the audience, half of the participants did not want to be on the photos. It was very difficult to find a person to even speak to the media. So we decided that this is the time for us to start talking to each other. And then only many years after that, we had some speakers, some people who were able to talk openly about who they are and who were able to advocate for the rights of the others.
10 years later and 10 conferences later, did the reaction of the community, of the Ukrainian people change for better or for worse, maybe?
Well, for past couple of years, especially after the Euromaidan, we saw quite an improvement in the attitudes of the Ukrainian society towards the LGBT community. In 2013, when we organized our first Pride March in Kyiv, we had only 80 participants and 2,000 police heavily protecting the Pride. It was, again, almost a secret event that had to be heavily protected. Last year, in 2016, we had 2,000 participants in the very center of the city, with massive support of the Ukrainian society. Of course, there were some people who wanted to attack us, who threatened to, that we will be beaten. Exactly,
as I've read it somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that didn't happen. And as we saw later in the media reports, many people who were not LGBTI, who were just, heterosexual Ukrainians, they came to the Pride to support us, and they came because they were strongly against the violence, and they were just there to protect us.
So the situation did change for the better since the Euromaidan revolution. Did your community take part in the revolution of dignity?
Yeah, this is a very good question, because now, because we were not visible at the Maidan, we did not come with the rainbow flags. Now
Why
many
not?
people, well, we decided that this would be used by the pro-Russian forces and by Russia as a provocation against the Maidan, and we had some, evidence that this was being planned. So we didn't want to be part of that pro-Russian, propaganda war. So we decided to be there under the Ukrainian and the European flag. But many LGBT people were at the Maidan. We did actively participate, and recently there was a film made about the participation of LGBT community in the Euromaidan revolution, in the Revolution of Dignity. It was made by a Canadian director, Marusia Butsurkiv, and the film is ironically called "This is Gay Propaganda," and I encourage everyone to watch it.
Okay. What was the expectations the LGBT community had for the Euromaidan revolution? What you thought would bring this, what kind of change did you expect to happen?
Well, when I went to the Maidan from the first days, I was there for what is called the European values, and one of them is human rights and rule of law. I realized that the situation in Ukraine would not change over the night, but I was there standing and fighting for the chance for the LGBTI community to have those rights in the near future. Because if the Euromaidan failed, we would be, you know, part of the Russian world, and we would have no chance at all.
Okay. In one of your interviews, I read that you said new post-revolutionary Ukraine failed your community. In fact, 2 years ago, you and your now husband were attacked by people who pepper sprayed you, and that was the clear message: not welcome. Is that something that the activists of the LGBT community in Ukraine have to face on a daily basis?
Yes, absolutely, and this happens especially outside of the capital, outside of the larger cities. People face discrimination on a daily basis. They are, you know, deprived of their homes by their parents. They face discrimination in their religious communities. They face discrimination at work or where they study, and this is widespread, but at the same time, a very hidden problem. Because most of those people are afraid to go to the police or to go to the court and try to protect their rights.
Okay, well, according to the latest human rights report, the level of homophobia among Ukrainian officials still remains very strong. And since 2014, the Ukrainian government has introduced a series of procedures in support of the LGBT community activists, including amendments to the labor code. Is that enough? And
Well,
is it really working?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is just the first step, and of course, it's not enough. There is some hope in the Ukrainian government that we have at the moment, and we hope that the National Action Plan for Human Rights will be implemented. Unfortunately, at the moment, this is a very good document, but the problem with documents in Ukraine is that they very often stay on paper. They very rarely are implemented. So there is a human rights action plan. It has a very clear list of things that have to be done to protect the rights of all people in Ukraine, including LGBTI people. Some of those items on the plan are very specific for LGBTI community, like the civil partnership that has to be adopted. This law has to be adopted this year, and it's already not happening, unfortunately.
Yes, because the government promised to officially legalize, well, gay marriages by the second quarter of 2017. And, well, we're looking at April. Has the government been successful in fulfilling those plans yet?
Well, not yet, and I have to emphasize that this is not yet about gay marriage. This is about civil partnership for all, including same-sex couples, and this is about basic rights, like to visit your partner at the hospital, or to, you know, to take care of your partner if he or she is ill. So these are just basic rights, and as a first step. And at the moment, we have a problem because there has to be a certain ministry in the government responsible for drafting, for preparing the draft law, and at the moment it hasn't been identified. So we have the Ministry of Justice, which is pointing fingers at the Ministry of Social Policy, and the Ministry of Social Policy says no, it's the Ministry of Justice who has to develop the law, and it's not going anywhere.
Okay, so it's just the game of throwing the ball back and forth, right?
Exactly. And at the same time, we have two draft laws ready, prepared by the NGOs, prepared by legal experts, that the government just has to, you know, take, maybe improve them a little bit, and here you are.
Nevertheless, you and your partner consider yourself married. You didn't wait for any official laws to be passed, and last year you organized a ceremony. Now, was that a message to the world, or did you just want to celebrate your relationship? And if it was a message, what kind of a message did you want to get out there?
Well, when we were planning the ceremony, it was meant to be a very small ceremony just for us and our friends, but became almost a political act because many people posted the pictures from the ceremony on Facebook. Then it has been picked up by the media. We also had a US channel, Vice News, filming the ceremony. So it became well known, and it was a very good example for Ukrainians to see, and it was a very good chance for us to explain why we want this. We don't want to impose anything on the Ukrainian society. We don't want to, ruin the traditional values. We just want to have a simple, good life in this country, just like all other Ukrainians have. So the message behind this was, just as I said, that we are fighting for our own rights, and just because we want to stay in this country and to contribute to its future. And of course, that this is only possible in Ukraine with international support.
Talking about international support, how does Ukrainian LGBT community communicate with the activists from around the world? Do you have a leader? Do you have a face representing you worldwide?
Well, at the moment we have a number of activists and a number of organizations which are at different occasions representing the community in Ukraine or outside Ukraine. We don't yet have a leader identified, one president of the LGBT community or you name it. And of course there are ties between Ukrainian LGBTI organizations and similar organizations in Europe or in the US or in Canada and even in Australia, where there is quite a significant Ukrainian community as well. So, and there are interactions. There is also a group of friendship between Kyiv and Munich in Germany, which are sister cities. Some Ukrainian LGBTI activists also participated in Pride March in Canada for a couple of years, and these ties are becoming even, more developed with time.
Last summer, to be precise, you organized the third Pride Parade in Ukraine. Are you going to organize the fourth one this summer?
Yes, absolutely. It's very important that the Pride March takes place every year.
Any ideas what's it going to look like?
Well, we are quite ambitious at our goals. Last year we had about 2,000 participants. This year we are planning for 5,000 participants and a much longer route in the center of the city and many other events around the Pride March, because this is the whole Pride Week, Kyiv Pride Week, and we organize cultural events, we organize movie screenings, we organize workshops for activists and workshops for basically for everyone. And we want to make it as inclusive and as diverse as possible.
Okay, well, that's a good plan to celebrate the existence and the message the Ukrainian LGBT community wants to get out there. But let's not forget that there is a war going on. And my question is, how does the Ukrainian gay community help people in Donbass who are trapped in Donbass or who are just, kept hostage in Donbass? Do you take any actions that way?
Yes, of course, and I have to say here that LGBT community is a part of this society, and there are LGBTI people everywhere, including the army, including the volunteer movement, including the doctors who save our soldiers every day. There are also specific things that the community does for its members and for other Ukrainians.
Specific things, you mean like shelters that you've organized throughout the country for people who had to flee their homes because of the war?
Yes, for example, there is a shelter for IDP LGBTI people from Donetsk and Luhansk and Crimea here in Kyiv. Many LGBTI people participate in different volunteer organizations. There is a website which demonstrates how LGBTI community is involved. Of course, there are financial contributions. We are, collecting money as much as we can to help the army, to help our volunteers, and to help the country.
So actively helping Ukraine battle Russian aggression.
Of course.
And I've come across a European study conducted in 2010 that showed that only 28% of Ukrainians believe that the LGBT community activists could express themselves freely and have a, well, like, open life, I mean, open position. 7 years later, do you think that number has grown by any chance?
Well, it's growing very slowly, I have to say, but there is a hope, because we have about 30% of Ukrainians who are more or less supportive, but it doesn't mean that 70% of Ukrainians are against. There is actually a very small number of Ukrainians who are actively homophobic, who engage in violence, who support, you know, attacks on the Pride
the number of how?
March.
10%, 6%?
It's less than 10%. I think it's around 5%. You know, actively homophobic people, just like those who attacked us, at me and my partner at Chrestiatek. They represent the minority. The larger part of Ukrainians don't have a position, or they don't care, or they are indifferent. But when they see violence against people, when they see, you know, accusations which have no ground, when they see that messages against LGBTI rights are actually supported and produced by Russian propaganda, they have to make their choice. So there is a huge hope in this, that the situation will quickly change. And we at Freedom House, actually, we conducted a study. We had conducted focus groups in 4 different cities in Ukraine, and we really have some very promising results. And one of the results, it was a very interesting result, like, you know, Ukrainians, just simple Ukrainians from Ukrainian cities, they said that they don't see LGBTI people on the streets very often. Many of them don't know anyone in person, but those who do, they have a very, very positive attitude towards the community. So one of the messages for the LGBTI people is that by your example, but by your openness and by your coming out, you are improving the situation in Ukraine. And the message to non-LGBTI people, the message to heterosexual people, is that if you are supportive, or if you are not actively against, you have to send, you know, signals around that you are supportive, because there might be people who you know, there might be your relatives, your neighbors, your colleagues at work who have no one to tell, and you might be that person who will support them.
That is a beautiful message, and I thank you so much for such an informative conversation. We had in our studio Zoryan Kis, an activist of the international human rights organization Freedom House. Thank you and goodbye.